Filip Lövström. Today's guest is the founder and CEO of Opibus, the largest EV manufacturer on the continent of Africa. You don't want to miss this one. He'll also share insights about his superpower, being an action-oriented visionary. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. Welcome to the Superpowers for Good show. Filip, thank you so much for joining us today. This is such an exciting thing to have you all the way from Kenya to join us for this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Devin. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm very excited about this conversation and what we shall yield from it.
Well, thank you. We're excited to talk to you about the amazing work that you're doing there in Kenya with making electric vehicles. And I'm excited because you're doing this on a relatively large scale. Continent-wise, you're the biggest electric vehicle manufacturer already. But you're doing this on relatively modest dollars compared to, say, Rivian, that just raised billions of dollars, right? You're operating, you've launched, you're selling vehicles and have been for a while for much, and having raised much less than Rivian, for instance. So tell us a little bit about where you are. Give us the picture.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're definitely in a different state than Rivian and a bunch of the global giants, right? I mean, we have set up shop here and made sure that our first priority from day one when we got here was to actually get vehicles out on the roads, make sure that we get homologated, safe, high quality vehicles out in utilization that are actually built here. So step one was just to assemble a vehicle here. We've taken the route of conversions for our vehicles because that's just a lower threshold. Because what we're doing is just building a foundation, right? We're building a foundation of engineering knowledge. We're building a foundation for our company when it comes to deploying products, and generating revenue to prove that there is a case for electric vehicles in Eastern Africa, in Kenya, in Sub-Saharan Africa, right? Because when we started, there was no other actor here. When we started, there was nothing happening, so we had to pretty much start from scratch, from zero. There's quite a noticeable difference between being the first actor in an area and then being the second biggest one, right? Right. Look at the comparison of Tesla's IPO and the valuation that now Rivian came on with, right? I mean, we're paving the way for both us and future companies to come.
Yes, well, it is exciting to see your progress, and you're doing just such amazing things in several different product lines. So I kind of want to go through all of them because I think each one has a unique impact on the world in terms of climate change and on the community. But let's start with electric buses. Getting people on electric buses seems like that is just a magic formula for reducing emissions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, buses and public transport in Kenya and in many parts of Sub-Saharan Africa is one of the big polluters. This region is left with secondhand trucks or vehicles that have very low emission standards. So not only is it internal combustion engines, it's quite poor internal combustion engines as well. So making these vehicles electric by either conversions or building new ones, that has a massive impact for the emissions that we are seeing here, for both the local emissions in the cities as well as the greenhouse gas emissions that is impacting the globe as we see them. And this just creates an incredible opportunity for us to focus on two things. One, focus on cost reduction for our clients, because they will spend so much less on an electric vehicle compared to a combustion engine vehicle. We're talking at least 50%, probably more. That is a lot of money when you're driving hundreds of kilometers per day. The second part is that it has a massive emissions mitigation potential. And that is really what we're focused on. So if we just take it back to our strategy of approaching both technology and market cases, we've said from day one that we do not need to develop new technology to actually implement climate change, the climate change transition that we're all waiting for. If that is about electrifying a transport fleet or whatever it is, we have solutions today that work. You just need to package it in the right way. And by the way we package it, we make sure that it's attractive from a financial standpoint for our clients. And instead of going, we're going to develop, the perfect electric pickup for the globe. We're saying, what use case do we have today, and what technology do we have today that match each other? And by doing that, we then make sure that we get solutions that we deploy today, because our
Yeah.
solutions are definitely too expensive for a small private vehicle, and we're not going to reach the same price point as some of the other global OEMs. But our price points are perfect for niche vehicles like buses or public transport, the public transport sector, where we can adapt the size of battery pack, for example. We can do all of these kind of things to just make sure that we get more green technology out there and more green technology utilization.
Let's talk a little bit about the buses from a practical standpoint, because this is such an important uh, piece of the business and such a high impact
Hmm.
thing. How are your clients configuring them in terms of batteries and range capacity? And then how are they dealing with the charging so that the buses can be optimized during, at least peak traffic times, maybe all day? Tell us a little bit about how that's all being managed.
Sure, sure. I mean, this is very much like, I mean, it's easy to draw parallels to early days Tesla when they started out, because they had to provide the full ecosystem, and we have to do the same thing here, right? We have to provide the charging infrastructure to make sure that we can um, use these at the capacity that's needed. So what we're doing right now is that we're deploying the fastest chargers on the African continent, as far as we are aware, and we minimize the battery packs. So instead of saying, "Hey, here, take this bus with 400-kilometer range," if they are only driving 45 kilometers, let's give them per single trip, right? But in a full day,
Hmm.
they drive 400 kilometers. What we do is that we provide them with a bus that can take them about 120, 130 kilometers. And then we put charging stations in each end. So we can minimize the raw material that's used for batteries. But they charge at every end and top up the batteries with just enough to just enough to bring it back up to 100%, right? So it's a pretty smart way to reduce the batteries that we need to use, which has both a material impact for the world. It is also a very smart way to reduce the full cost of the system. By customizing in this way, we can make the whole solution cheaper, which
Hmm.
makes sure that we have a fast return on investment. And this is now where it starts getting interesting. Like I said, where does the technology meet the use case today? Where does the technology that we have accessible, that is available, meet the implementation cases where we can use electric mobility? And that's where we,
Yeah.
for example, started out with electric safari vehicles, which was our first product, because they have so many benefits from utilizing electric vehicles when it comes to the branding perspective, when it comes to their green ethos of what they want to create, because they see the changes in ecosystems. So they're extremely motivated to move away from fossil fuel vehicles, for example. So that was a
Yeah.
great
Right.
entry market. It was perfect for us to start with, and it made sense for them for so many different reasons. And a lot of these camps have the possibility to pay for these solutions. And I
Sure.
think
Sure.
that's how we should approach it. Instead of trying to optimize our way to a private industry, or sorry, private sector vehicle, where we are looking at the car that you use to commute, because that's the approach we've taken in Europe and in the US.
Hmm.
We've said, okay, how can we make everybody's private vehicles electric as fast as possible? And that's very difficult, because you have so many different ways of using these. Whereas commercial vehicles, they usually drive from point A to point B. It's very easy to calculate how much batteries you need. It's very easy to calculate where your charging stations are, and it has a very clear return on investment from a commercial
Yeah.
perspective.
It's genius, genius. Well, let's jump to motorcycles now. You're
Mm-hmm.
making electric motorcycles.
Great.
Tell us about the product itself. I'm curious about all the things that go into that and what it's like to use, and then of course tell us a little bit about the market. Who have you designed that for?
So I mean, that's the motorbikes are as well an extremely interesting market when it comes to emissions reductions and the potential of that. The sheer amount of motorbikes is I mean, I'm not a native English speaker, but I would definitely say bonkers. It's 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 a crazy amount. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of motorbikes going out every year in every single country in East Africa. Approximately 5% of the population in Sub-Saharan Africa earn the majority of their daily income from riding a motorbike. So motorbikes are a huge part of the infrastructure system here, right? Either for a taxi or for deliveries or end of mile deliveries or there's numerous different ways that they participate in society as a crucial function. But what we also know about motorbikes is that they do not have a strong cleaning mechanism for their emissions, for both for local or global gases that they emit. Right. So what we have done is that we've said that today technology is at a point that where we can, with the appropriate scale and design, we can reach a a costing point of electric motorbikes where we can make them almost the same cost as a petrol bike, and you still save at least 50% of your daily operating expenditure or your operating cost on this. So through what we want to make sure, not today, not tomorrow, but in a year or two from now, we want to make sure that the cost of our motorbike that we deploy into the market means that you stand there and you're going to buy a new motorbike and you say, either I'm going to spend $1,300 on a petrol bike and then spend $4 or $5 per day on fuel, or I'm going to spend $1,300 on an electric motorbike. I'm going to spend $2 on electricity for charging it. And those are the choices that you will be facing. And by doing that, we can reduce emissions to quite frankly a lot. It's a massive scale. I'm not gonna pretend to give you any numbers now, but we're talking about a significant part of the emissions reductions that Kenya has promised in their nationally determined contributions. Right, which is a part of the Paris Agreement,
Yeah,
which is at least something to strive towards. But we need to, of course, strive to achieve as much as possible as soon as possible, and we all have a responsibility to that. So we are taking our responsibility by focusing on the products that actually create the biggest change, right? And fortunately enough, they have a match with the products that also makes a lot of commercial sense from a revenue perspective, from a return on investment for the client perspective, as well as from a perspective when you look at the available technology.
yeah. Now, the buses are built, typically you're rehabilitating an old bus, a
Hmm.
used bus, and retrofitting it with the electric equipment, the battery and the motors.
Correct.
With the motorcycles, are you building new ones from the ground up, or are you retrofitting old ones?
Oh no, we are doing completely new ones for the motorbikes just because of the sheer scale and production capacity that we need to reach.
Hmm.
Conversions make sense for some types of vehicles that are that have higher value because you will always have a certain percentage of labor that will be higher with the conversion than with building a new vehicle, just because there is some standardization that you just cannot do, and that's where you need
Sure.
good engineers and great engineers, and that's what we have in Kenya. Kenya has an amazing set of engineers, and we have come in here. I mean, I'm from Sweden, but we have come in here and added vehicle knowledge and electric vehicle engineering capacity. but that is to an already existing fantastic foundation of engineers.
Yeah. You have been doing some, I think you called them safari vehicles. They
Hmm.
look like pretty traditional pickup trucks to me, but talk a little bit about those. Do you still do those, or have you moved beyond that now?
No, so that is still part of our product portfolio, and that was our first product. And we moved partly past that. We're focusing much more on developing buses and motorbikes for the bigger markets. But all of this is very much within the same technology suite and technology architecture, and that's where we are focusing. That's why it's relatively easy for us to have quick turnarounds, because the architecture and the ecosystem of technology that we have developed already is quite quick and easy to integrate into new platforms. And with a new platform, I mean the comparison between a bus or two different types of pickups, and etc. So all the development learnings that we have on a bus go straight into our pickups and our utility vehicles as well. Because this is, I mean, we started out in the safari market, but there is a big market within, for example, the mining industry, within all kinds of utility vehicles where you are carrying heavy loads or you're driving in rough terrains, right? Which is quite similar to a safari vehicle that jumps around Masai filled with tourists.
Yeah. Well, it's a really cool introductory product. I'm glad you're still making it, and I presume these are retrofitted like the buses. These are pickup trucks that you buy and
Exactly.
retrofit as electric vehicles, right?
Exactly, because
Um,
it makes sense in a country where you have almost 95% of the vehicles coming into the country being secondhand vehicles. For us to be able to reach our targets um, of the amount of emissions that we wanna mitigate, both on a local scale as well as on a global scale, we need to do more than what the global electric vehicle production capacity is today, right? Because
yeah,
we might be putting out a few million vehicles per year, but we still have 1.2 billion vehicles in the world today. So we need to make sure that we can make as many of them electric as soon as possible. And
sure,
the
sure.
technology that we're developing here and the technology we've put to use here and that we're deploying is part of that solution. Definitely. Not the only one. I have a massive respect for um, the there is a big part of the world that are all working towards the same targets. And I don't think that there is a lot of competition because we need all solutions and we need all solutions as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, yes, yes. Let's talk about your solar panels and your solar
Mhm.
equipment. I think you do inverters and the whole shebang for people. Tell us a little bit about your that market and how that's growing for you.
So this is the same thing, right? It started out as a fact that we needed to provide an ecosystem. We need to provide quite high tech high tech lithium battery storage solutions as we enter the market. We've been one of the first in the whole area in the region that has done that, and this is very much this is a very strong focus of ours to make sure that we can provide as many green solutions as possible without spreading ourselves too thin. So this is again still based on the same architecture as we are deploying in our vehicles today. There's a lot of design learnings in between there because a company of our size, we can't develop too many products, right? So we need to make sure that we are smart with how we develop them and make sure that we have integrations between the products in a really good way. Um, and therefore use the same type of architecture and the same type of ecosystem in that. Um, but the solar panels are pretty much they're based on solar and they're based on battery solutions and storage solutions, right? Because there is today a big part of Canada, East Africa that is still not connected to a grid, and we can provide a lot of solutions for that. So deploy them both as part of our charging solutions for electric vehicles, but also as individual and independent solutions to homes, families, hospitals, companies, or different types of entities that need energy access, because that's what it's about.
My visit to Kenya a few years ago left me with the
Hmm.
impression that the grid, where it exists, isn't fully reliable. People aren't able to count on the power. And so there's a lot of people seem to be deploying solar as a backup source of power or an auxiliary
Hmm.
power source. I remember being in meetings and the grid power would go off and on during the meeting, and different devices would go on and off each time, because on solar power only the air conditioner would go off but the lights would stay on, for instance. What How are people using your solar panels, your systems, in grid connected communities?
Yeah, that's quite accurate, and that's still the case. That we have quite a lot of um, problems with the grid, but it's not actually about energy supply. It's about grid build and the quality of the quality of the grid and the transfer capacity of the grid. So Kenya actually has an overproduction of energy as it is today, which is why electric vehicles become increasingly important, because we should make use of that energy. And the grid in itself is 80% renewables. Right? There is a lot of thermal, there is a lot of hydro, wind, and solar, which is amazing. But
Wow.
yeah, like you're saying, the grid definitely has some issues with its transfer capacity, and there's quite a lot of people who tend to gravitate towards our solutions of lithium batteries, because of over the lifespan of lithium batteries are just far superior to lead acid batteries as it is today,
Oh, sure.
as you might be aware. But I mean, I'm happy to say that there, since we got started here, there is quite a number of actors that has moved into the market offering different types of lithium battery solutions, which I'm very happy with, because that's the technology we should be deploying at this stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is an amazing effort that you're making. Give us a sense of scale, for how things are going and how you project things to go over the next few years, so we have a sense of where you are and where you're going.
Yeah, I mean, asking an entrepreneur about scale is a it's a good question. We're of course going to be the world's biggest supplier of electric vehicles, but no, but I think there is a at this point we're very much focusing on getting it right. I mean, that's where we are in our company journey and company history, right? So we're deploying products quite cautiously, making sure that we get we get the product rights, we get the quality rights, we get the uh, production capacity correct, we get the suppliers, and everything we make. We There are so many parts in the chain of developing a product and deploying a product that needs to happen, and I think that's where we have a lot of interesting things ahead of us when it comes to all of these massive electric vehicle companies that has an extremely high valuations, and it's not only one. There's quite a number of them that has never deployed a single product, and that's a knowledge that you need to have and you need to build, right? And that's where we are different, because we want to make sure that we deploy and iterate as quickly as possible so that we can scale as quickly as possible, because you can develop a company you can develop a product in all eternity, but if you never hit the market, you're never going to get the
Yeah.
feedback or the scale you need. So right now we're focused on deploying, relatively modest levels of products, testing them on a couple of different markets, both within Kenya and within Sub-Saharan Africa. So making sure that we get motorbikes to several different markets, to make sure that our product to market fit is correct, making sure that our telemetry will work the way it's intended to, making sure um, that the user stories are similar in different areas, which I can tell you they are not. So there's a couple of things we need to change in our designs to make sure that we can fit several spectrums on the same product. Um,
Yeah.
so right now we're targeting to deploy a few thousand motorbikes next year, and then a few tens of thousands of motorbikes the year after that in 2023. And then after that, we want to make sure that we can scale as quickly as possible up to a couple of hundred thousands of motorbikes by the mid of this decade, because
Yeah.
that's
Wow.
really where we need to be, and that's the production capacity we need to build. And we're focusing very much now on making sure that we get suppliers and producers and manufacturers with us that can follow us on that journey and follow us on that trajectory to make sure that they can grow with us as we grow and scale up.
Yeah. You recently completed a round of financing that included
Hmm.
both a grant portion and equity.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm guessing that you'll need to raise additional equity to help fund the expansion. That
Correct.
can't all be funded by profits. What's your plan for capitalizing the business as you grow?
No, that's quite accurate. I mean, we started out with the first 2.5 years of this business um, completely bootstrapped, without any kind of equity investment, a few grants, some debt, but primarily focused on organic growth, because we wanted to make sure that we got our perspective of it right. We figured out the market, we figured out what the market needs, we figured out the where we should focus our energy. That energy has ended up being on motorbikes and buses, because it's very easy to come in and say we're going to do this, we're going to only focus on the pickup or the utility market. But if we would have done that, we would have missed out that actually the most interesting markets are the ones that are going to be the biggest in urban communities, because urban communities in Africa are growing the fastest. Africa as a continent is growing the fastest in the world, and transport solutions in these cities are going to be motorbikes and buses. So if we want to be in the future of the market, we should focus on motorbikes and buses. We should focus on catering for solutions that reduce the emissions in these areas, and then make sure that we can deploy them as quickly as possible. And with figuring a bunch of these things out, and with raising the biggest round of financing for electric mobility in Sub-Saharan Africa, in the history of Sub-Saharan Africa so far, um, we of course need to see, for both you and me, for everyone watching and listening, that this is just the start of it. If we actually want to seriously deploy these solutions, we need to put a lot more money to work. Um, so we're going to raise a few more rounds. We have the possibility of stopping and living off the revenue that we are creating through the products we're deploying, which is again one of the differences between us and others. Which is a very for me as a entrepreneur, it's very I'm very grateful for that, because it makes my
Hmm.
life a bit easier. Because when I go out fundraising, I don't need the fundraising to survive. I need the fundraising to scale up. But of course, we are going to fundraise to scale up quite aggressively, because with figuring out the recipe of how to do this in the best way for this region, the thing that we need now is to hit it at scale, and that is that needs to happen fast.
Yeah, that's exciting. I am so excited about what you're doing. I'm thrilled to hear it. I'm already trying to convince you to come back in a couple of years and tell us how you're doing. Maybe every year for the rest of your life. I don't want you to feel like an indentured servant, but we want you to come back and
Yeah,
tell us how you're doing.
yeah,
Um,
of course.
but Philippe, you've accomplished a lot already, and
Thank
I'm
you.
excited about where you're going. But tell us, what is your superpower?
So this is an interesting question, and I think that you can pitch it in so many different ways. I have always been Well, first of all, I think our superpowers comes a bit from can come at least from what our um, I don't know what to call it, the flaws in our personalities are. So I've always been a dreamer. I've always been a visionary. I've always been someone who has had big ambitions and grand ambitions, but for a long part of my life and my childhood, that never really amounted to anything. I would spend a long time and a lot of time daydreaming and thinking about what to do and what to create. And I've always been building things and doing things, but it never really amounted to anything because I spent all my time daydreaming and envisioning what could be. So I think my superpower has come from that flaw, right? From the flaw of never actually creating anything. I have instead become extremely focused on breaking things down, taking a big vision and saying, okay, so we're going to be the biggest electric vehicle supplier on the African continent, perhaps for the full global south. How does that break down to what I do today and tomorrow? Today, that is recording a podcast with you. Tomorrow, that is developing our next generation of motorbikes. But step by step, breaking things down into smaller portions. Some people call that first principle of thinking, of just breaking things down into their fundamentals. Yeah, I think you can apply it in so many different ways, but that is definitely something that has helped me tremendously with both building this company, with both as well as keeping us on track to what we want to do, and keeping us on track towards our visions and what we're trying to create here, which is a carbon-free society, right? And
I think
emissions. Yeah.
that's a brilliant superpower, and I wonder if you can identify examples of how you applied that approach to a
Mhm.
particular problem or challenge and had it work out, so that our audience can kind of get a little deeper into your head and figure out how to do this.
I mean, there are so many different levels of how to do this. One part of this is definitely to take a step back from what you're actually doing, right? And instead of getting caught up in the details of the moment, to see what they fundamentally mean. It's a very good question.
Yeah, I mean, it may
um,
be a challenge for you to think of one off the top of your head here, but any example would help us figure out how to apply this thinking to real life situations.
I mean, there are two different ways depending on how you want to view this, right? I think a good example is what I've been speaking about when it comes to our strategy and our approach to technology, which is
Hmm.
um, instead of staring ourselves blind at the types of products that we could be creating, fundamentally, what we want to do is to reduce emissions, right? And that's part of the first principle, right? We want to reduce emissions, and instead of going the route of the cars that we usually see, let's look at the cars that have the most emissions and let's try and reduce as much as possible, as quickly as possible. Um, I'm struggling a bit to make sure that this makes proper sense. So follow with me here. Um,
Okay.
but part of this now. If we've decided that that is our mantra, that the mantra is that we want to reduce emissions as much as possible, we're looking at the cars that emit the most, right? This is part of first principle thinking, right? Which is what Elon Musk
Hmm.
speaks about, and all of this, and that is one side of the superpower I'm talking about. But it's primarily on the side of looking at, okay, if we now want to create these electric vehicles, which is the step that we take today? Is that to lay out a strategy towards developing a new vehicle? Is that to lay out a strategy towards implementing electric vehicles as fast as possible? And that becomes your own. That becomes your own guidance, right? That becomes your own strategy of what you want to create. That becomes your. It's tricky. It's a good
Yeah.
question, Devin. It is.
Well,
I'm trying to make it
it's
very, very clear.
yeah, yeah. I appreciate that. Let's come at this a different way, Philippe, just for a moment. But as you think about this talent, this skill, the superpower you've developed, and this approach to thinking and first principles, how would you teach someone to apply this? And maybe you do that. Maybe you teach this to your employees or your executive team. But tell us a little bit about how you think you could teach us to be more like you.
Right. So I think from how I see this, it's very much about identifying the core of what you want, and identifying how you want to create that. And instead of staring yourself blind at how many steps it is to get there, you start identifying a few milestones along the way, but primarily you start walking, because it's not one giant step that covers 1,000 steps that will get us somewhere. It's 1,000 steps covering one giant step.
Yeah,
And I think
interesting.
breaking it down into start walking and start learning is how we actually engage with real problems. It's so easy to miss out, to not see the forest for all the trees, or to look at a mountain and be scared of it instead of just start walking. Now the tricky question is, which direction do you walk, and what do you actually do day to day. But that is, I think it's more important to do something than to do nothing.
Yeah. Well, uh, I certainly share that belief.
Mm.
And I'm excited about what you are doing. And certainly I see the application of that in your evolution, right? You started not by building a business plan and raising capital. You started by converting safari vehicles to electric and selling them and making money and proving there was an opportunity, and then grew that into buses and now motorcycles, et cetera, et cetera. So this is
Yeah,
this
that's
is
a good example, actually.
yeah,
That's pretty
yeah.
much what we're doing at this point.
Yeah, so it's brilliant work. Philippe, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Before you go,
Mhm.
I'd invite you to take a minute and tell people how they can learn more about you. Uh, I know there are a lot of people who are, climate activists who will watch this, who want to just follow your progress and cheer you on. There are others who may be interested in investing down the line. Others who may be listening, because we do have listeners in Africa that may be trying to figure out how to get a scooter from or a motorcycle from you or a bus.
Mhm.
So tell us how people can follow you, learn more, get in touch.
Sure. So, I mean, first of all, thank you very much for listening. For the ones that have has made it this far, I'm very grateful for your interest in both climate change as well as in what I'm doing, and I'm very happy that you're hopefully probably participating in the fight against climate change, and making the world a better place. And if you're not, you're more than welcome to join the fight. You can find out a lot more about us at opibus.se. You can also follow our Instagram. You can check out our Facebook page, our LinkedIn page, or Twitter page. So pretty much anywhere where you have a social media account, you can find us under OPIBUS.
Fantastic. Well, Philippe, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. It's a thrill to get this update and to see what you're doing. And I want to wish you every possible success in scaling this business to the moon and beyond.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Devin. Pleasure to be here.
All righty. Let's do some good. Thank you for tuning in to the Superpowers for Good show. Twice each week,
We host changemakers who share their impact, insights, and superpowers. Don't miss another episode. Subscribe today at superpowersforgood.com. That's superpowers, good.com. Be super empowered. Get your copy of the book, Superpowers for Good, as an ebook, audiobook, paperback, or hardcover edition via your favorite online retailer. Interested in having me speak to your company, organization, or association? Visit devinthorpe.com. Then let's talk. Now, keep using your superpowers for good. Together, we can reverse climate change, improve global health, and eradicate poverty.